if we were to say and have a campaign well in advance of an election that we have, 10,000 voters in Wisconsin, let's say, who are tried and true voters and will absolutely vote for the Democratic candidate, whether this is organized as a party, whether it's organized in some other fashion. And we will deliver them to you only if X, Y, and Z. And we're able to get the media to accurately cover that the asks are, in fact, things that average Americans want. Then that could potentially, and, it might not work, but I would like to see someone try if they can provoke a conversation about why it is that the Democratic Party is dropping the ball as opposed to the Green Party or whatever this organization is being the spoiler.
That's a powerful political strategy. Getting thousands of people to sign a petition saying we want our vote to count, and the only way our vote can count is if you agree to the following agenda. If you do, we'll campaign for you and bring out more votes. If you don't, we're going to be free to vote for your opponent, to vote for a third party, to stay home, and not to support your candidacy in any other way. Why not? That's the way you really get people thinking. That's the way you get people having a higher estimate of their own significance as voters. Because there's too many people who stay home because they think they're nobodies and nobody's going to listen to them. And what's the value of their vote? The two politicians are all the same. They don't listen to us. So that's a very good way to motivate people to do more than demand, but actually start mobilizing, put some of their energy to state and local level as well. Another way people can do it is to support a primary challenger. Incumbents are terrified of primary challengers. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why all these Republicans are sticking with Trump now, who led a assault on the U.S. Congress, sedition, violence, you name it, and they're still sticking with him in the Congress, is because they're afraid he'll support primary candidates against them, and they get very lazy with their safe seats and get reelected with big margins, and they don't have to sweat it on the campaign trail. So they don't want to have a primary opponent. And the third way is to summon the members who are already in elective office to direct town meetings, where you really can get the feel for them. You can demand their agenda, demand the agenda of the people sponsoring the town meetings, and have them respond right there with the press all around. Have them respond. You make a personal connection, and then they're going to start returning your calls in the subsequent weeks and months. So all kinds of opportunities. There are books with all kinds of organizing advice, how to get more press, how to turn out the vote. People don't use them. They're experienced authors who write these books. And we've written a lot of these books. I mean, I have a weekly column that I've been writing since 1971, and I'll bet you that the people who download that column or who get it automatically free every week, they have to go to nader.org. I'll bet you 95% of them are over the age of 35.
Well, I check out.
They just, I can't tell you how many young people I talk to tell me, we don't read anymore. We can't even read through a book anymore.
Well,
everything is short attention span.
Well, though, a lot of those people are listening to you here and now. So I'm curious, what advice you mentioned, trying to go to the Congresswomen's office and the squad member's office and give them advice. Can you give us here and now the advice that you would have liked to have passed on of what the left should do to make itself heard, particularly in the context of the pandemic, where one, we can't congregate the way we used to, we can't call in-person town halls, but also there is an exigency brought on by the crisis?
Well, this COVID changes the whole atmosphere. I mean, there's so many things you can do before COVID you can't really do now. But a lot of people, for example, when you say contact your member of Congress, they don't have a clue that the member of Congress has 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on whether they're senators or representatives, district offices. And if you go to the district office, or if you even communicate with the district office, you're more likely to get through And second, the district office then sends the message to the national office on Capitol Hill, and they know how to get through because they're part of the office. So it's just that kind of information needs to be gathered by people. There are all kinds of ways on how to write letters and emails to members of Congress to make it get through and have much more power. For example, you always, when you write a letter demanding something, you always make sure you ask the member of Congress 2 or 3 questions which require them to go to the Congress and get the answer. That starts educating the staff. It starts giving priority to your letter or your email among the hundreds that they get in a given week. The other thing is at the bottom of the letter or the email, you say CC, and you say you're going to send this to the local newspaper, the local TV reporter, or to their potential opponent. And then they start listening to you more. And then you have a PS. You say, Senator, I know this is a letter only signed by little old me, but if you want me to have the same letter signed in 2 weeks by 50 people, please let me know right away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reflecting on the phone tree, the calls to Congress people that we did in the course of Force the Vote. And we did, there were lots of people, many of whom belong to these other organizations like DSA, like I myself do, who were frustrated that those organizations weren't using their resources to put out the call. But we organized separately and did it ourselves. And the main obstacle was just that nobody answered the calls. Nobody answers the calls. You can't go to people's office in person. COVID is enabling people to be ignored in a really interesting way.
That's a very important point. You know what it's enabling now?
What's that?
It's so bad now. You know, in the old days, so to speak, you call a member of Congress, a human being would answer automatically with a couple of rings. Now, most of the members are on voicemail. That is, the switchboard itself is on a voicemail. I just tried to call, for example, Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who I knew when he was a law student at University of Texas back in 1970, and who was a former justice of the Texas Supreme Court. And I know his chief of staff. And it's impossible. I've left messages. It's like in a void. You can't get through to anybody.
Yeah.
So the way you do it is you do a simple, peaceful picket in front of the local district office of your congressperson, or you do a virtual picket and put it online with the member of Congress name emblazoned in front of the picket. You see, there are different ways you can do it to personalize it. I've learned that if I can't get through to a member of Congress now, and I go on line and I say, will someone help me get through to a member of Congress? I just thought of that recently. Well, it's like a crowdsourcing. You get people say, you can't get through to my member of Congress. I'll call a member of Congress and see. Well, obviously, they pay a little more attention to their constituents back home in the cluster of calls they get every day than they do from someone in Washington, D.C.
Well, I was a Jamal Bowman. When I was making calls for Force the Vote over the holidays, I was in Jamal Bowman's district. My mother lives in his district and was calling, as a constituency from I think it's 916 area code. And, that didn't cause anybody to answer the phone either. So I do think that as much as I understand your frustrations with social media, there are, obviously the left doesn't really have access to corporate media. And there are now, because of YouTube and podcasts, et cetera, people who have enormous platforms that really are able to get social media campaigns going, hashtags trending, for better or for worse, that cause Congress people to feel a certain kind of pressure. Now, is it the same amount of pressure as you're occupying somebody's office? Perhaps not. But I do think it's useful to continue to brainstorm and think creatively about ways to use that pressure, especially in the context of COVID, since we have
That's right.
very little else.
Another way is if you get a hold of a local reporter, they usually respond to local reporters and say, we're not hearing from our senator or representative. Can you open the way for you? That's another approach. Congressman Bowman, we have great anticipation because of where he comes from. And we're now trying to reach him. He was personally on our tutorial Zoom call. We're starting tutorials now. It's a lot of difficulty because members of Congress, new members of Congress get elected. And there's a lot of things they don't have any knowledge about, and they're not told about by their elders because their elders don't want them to be empowered. And so we have a constitutional law expert. He was on the line, Bruce Fine, and 6 or 7 new Congress people were on the line, and he enthralled them with all the power they have that they weren't told they have. So,
you love to hear it. I'm glad that that's happening. I want to ask you, what do you think is, how should the left be thinking about the power that's available to them now that Joe Biden is president? Because there does seem to be this feeling that, okay, we tried, we failed with Bernie, and now we just have to reset our expectations for the next 4 years. How should the fact of Joe Biden being president, having said what he said about vetoing Medicare for all of that stuff, affect the way that the left pushes those issues over the next 4 years?
Sorry. Other than his rather stupid comment during the campaign, he would veto a Medicare for all bill. He's been saying all the right things so far, more than any other elected president, because he's scared of the plight of the country. I mean, this incredibly serious problems in the country coming to a boiling point, not just under the radar, the economy, the COVID, and so forth. So what I would do is keep holding him and his nominees to their rhetoric. And the more meat you get on the rhetoric, so to speak, the more the rhetoric is not revoked and pulled back and flim-flammed. And you do that in a whole variety of ways. You get to know the lower echelons of the agency that you want action from. They often have local offices, especially in the social service areas. You get to know the press that covers them. You get to know the people back home who they counsel. And it's just a lot of ways. But, it takes, the only place where democracy comes before work is in a dictionary. D comes before W.
So what is the work? I don't mean to be glib. I don't. And if podcasts are good for anything, I think it should be that you can have a more substantive, detailed conversation about what people want to do. I think people who listen to this podcast, they want to know in practical terms what they should be doing. They're not afraid of action. But what becomes frustrating on the left is that there's a lot of talk about how we need to organize and not a lot of very specific advice about what to do. So what would you advise people to target right now and concentrate on in this moment and strategically how to go about doing it?
Well, I call them long overdue problems with long overdue solutions. So the living wage, the full Medicare for all, increasing the budgets, cracking down on corporate crime, fraud, and abuse that drive consumers, patients, workers, community people up the wall because they're not given voice. I would also focus on opening up the public airways, which are dominated by a few giant media corporations. Now, you want to pick and choose your cause.
Yeah,
everybody has their special
just those
cause.
things.
Yeah, everybody has, which is good. That's not everybody's interested in everything or has the time to be interested in dozens of social justice missions. But the important thing is to personalize your relationship with your elected official. And I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, but you want to keep asking your elected official to do things and to meet with you and force that person to say no, 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 until it becomes a serious problem for that person. I've often said, for example, why don't you invite your member of Congress to 25 meetings all over the district? Mm-hmm. This is pre-COVID. For meetings. And the invitations are tendered by people who are deprived, are excluded, are demanding, are progressive, you name it. In other words, the member knows that it's not going to be a pleasant time of nonsense, sweet talk. And so the staff says, Representative, we have all these invitations, they're not really your supporters and they don't give you any money. Mm-hmm. Well, just, give them an excuse. Tell them no. Tell them, if it's a big group, I'll send you, my staff member, some Saturday. But you see, after a while, you make the representative say no, no, no. That you develop power. You develop a counterintuitive type of power. Eugene Debs once said, the great labor leader, he said, when you want to change the power structure, you got to be ready to lose until you win. And if you have a short attention span, and if you're so sensitive as a citizen that you're blistered by moonbeams and you take no personally, you'll never get to that eighth no, at which you constantly keep mobilizing, constantly keep building, constantly increasing the righteous indignation of people.